Hello and welcome to the first piece of content for Synthetic Native. Today I have an interview for you. It is with a local president, CEO, creative director of a small gaming company here in Seattle. Her name is Evie Powell, and we had a really good conversation at the Seattle International Film Festival where she was talking about VR. And in this interview, we mainly talk about VR. She talks a little bit about how you can get into developing VR, some of the best free-to-play games and products for VR, and some of the problems that people still need to solve in order to make VR a better, more usable experience. So I really hope you enjoy it. I'm going to be trying to bring more content like this, interviews and stuff from people both here in Seattle and nationally, internationally. So please leave a comment or let me know what you think about this. And enjoy. So could you just introduce yourself and talk about what you do?
Sure. I'm Evie Powell. I'm the creative director and CEO of Verge Brilliance. Verge Brilliance is an experimental games company based in Seattle. Yeah.
Nice. Do you have a development background at all, like engineering?
Yes. So before working there, I worked at Microsoft. So
Okay.
I worked at Microsoft on the Xbox Connect team for a couple of years.
Xbox Connect team. Awesome.
Yeah.
So what would you say, this is something that's kind of relevant to myself personally, but probably a lot of people. What is a good way for somebody who's not like a VR developer, but they are maybe an engineer or something in like a different discipline to start just getting into VR development?
VR development is more accessible than it's ever been.
Mm-hmm.
There are tons of pre-existing game engine platforms that just support it, like with just the game engine itself. So Unity has just sort of built-in VR support. The other communities sort of around it, the Steam VR, Steam and stuff like that, make plugins that make this even easier.
Mm-hmm.
So as far as if you're an engineer, you have experience with games or game engines in general, you'll probably find built-in VR support in most major game engine platforms. It's a thriving community, especially if you're based here in Seattle.
Mm-hmm.
There's always at least a few hundred people that are willing to sort of help people sort of deep dive into it. I'd say that the bigger challenge is just making sure that if you're doing something that uses positional tracking, using one of the bigger, higher powered VR experiences, like a HTC Vive or an Oculus Rift, you're going to need a really high powered machine that has a supported graphics card. And so that can sometimes cost some money, and then also the hardware itself costs money. So there's a little bit of that overhead too.
Okay, so that power that's required to play HTC Vive games, for example, is that on parity with the power needed to just develop, or is it more powerful?
Well, actually, I would say that if you have a machine that will support VR games at the frame rate required, you can develop on that machine.
You can develop on it. Okay.
Yeah.
What would you say, if you happen to know or have some idea, what are the top three VR titles or technologies that you think people who should be looking out for that are coming out?
Oh, okay.
Not to put you on the spot, but
Yeah. I mean, I have some favorites that I really like. If you're not looking to spend any money, there's some games or experiences that came out when the Vive came out that were free. The Blue Whale Encounter, Brookhaven Experiment, things like that. Those are all great games. They're free to play, and they really sort of just introduce people into VR. Tilt Brush is transformative. So lots of people are now sort of developing and even actually trying to tie that into their production pipeline, is actually building content in Tilt Brush and exporting it as models.
That's a 3D
almost like Photoshop or Paint like experience?
Yeah, it's like a 3D painting experience, very similar to a Photoshop. I don't think they have layers built in yet, so I guess in that way it's not quite. But you have lots and lots of different brushes, access to different. You have an infinite board or canvas that you can build like entire worlds, or you can go really detailed with it. And it's shareable, so like all of the content that you create, it may make it really easy to share it online and stuff like that. So it's sort of creating its own community.
Right.
So yeah, those are pretty great experiences.
Cool.
Rick and Morty is the one that I'm kind of like, I like to talk about now.
Did that one live up
like
to the hype?
I think so. I mean, it was. The experience, they touched on a lot of really interesting concepts of like sort of going through a story or whatever in VR, which is something that like we're starting to try to piece together how we actually do that and pull that off. Yeah, I mean, for me as a big fan of Rick and Morty, I think it delivered. It had that sort of job simulator type feel to it, which is something I really enjoyed. And then they sort of turned it and put it in a world that I really wanted to be a part of to begin with. So I was a pretty easy sell.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll do one more. Other than locomotion, which is I think usually comes up as like the biggest problem in VR or one of the bigger ones. What is the problem you think that VR, AR, XR technologists need to solve for better experiences?
Ooh. So aside from locomotion, I would say that we're still trying to solve comfort. VR is cumbersome. It is big and gaudy. It's tethered. Things like that. A lot of these things, when you put it all together, just lead to comfort experiences that just fall short in allowing people to explore without feeling uncomfort or discomfort. It's a lot of different things put together. It's I think the closest we are to solving a giant problem. I think that developers also have to do their part to be mindful of the limitations of the device. So you're not making people fall on their face. You're not making people turn their head in a position that's not like very comfortable. Knowing what those comfort zones are in VR is really important. So it's like if you're doing something where you're making people stare up at the sun for an hour or for minutes at a time, they're probably only going to last about 2 or 3 minutes before they become really uncomfortable with the experience. Right? I'd say it's a big problem. It's something we sort of have to evangelize and get more people thinking about it.
And locomotion is certainly at least tangential to that, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Locomotion is probably one of the easiest ways to make someone uncomfortable in a VR experience.
Right.
Just because people are not aware of like the difference of having your periphery be such a critical part of the experience. People aren't aware of the effect that causes on people because they're like, oh, well, I do it all the time in regular games.
Look around. And stuff.
Like looking around using the analog sticks or walking forward or accelerating forward or whatever. And it's like, well, why would it bother me in VR? And it's like, okay, well, there's a little bit more of your brain at play here, and it's going to be what causes people to have a disconnect between what they're seeing and what like their ear system or their vestibular system is telling them.
Right.
Because when two of your senses disconnect like that, where it's like you've got one system telling you you're standing still and another system that's telling you you're moving forward, your brain makes the logical conclusion that your stomach's to blame, you ingested some poison, it needs to be gotten rid of immediately.
Right.
So it's like, it becomes like, oh, okay, well, I'm just going to make you kind of nauseous.
Right.
So
one last mini question. Other than Seattle, is there any other place that's a great hub for VR?
I've seen some places in LA. VR LA is hosted in Los Angeles. I see a few places in California that seem like they're trying to establish themselves as, if not like another VR hub, maybe a VR film hub or 360 video hub. So there's, I think that there's different things that we're trying to solve in these places. But yeah, there's bigger communities and growing communities in certain parts of California and Washington.
LA, San Francisco.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Evie. Did I get your name right,
Yep.
Evie? Okay, thank you so much, and I hope to see you around the VR community.
Excellent. Yeah, you too. You as well.